the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
Hey guys, this is Andrew Hollister, your host of Radio Free New York. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll let you guys in on a little chuckle. I'm here ready to start the show, and I realize I don't have my mic.
Microphone's not in front of you.
Yep. So I quickly grabbed it just in time. A little inside humor there. I'm here in the WYSL studio with Bob Savage, as usual.
Greetings, all.
And there's a lot to go over today. And you know what's funny is the days that I feel like there's so much to talk about, those are the days at the end of the show I'm like, oh crap, we sprinted through all of it. So I'm going to try to cover it, but at the regular pace. And, you know, if stuff bleeds over into Monday, we'll see what happens.
Take a deep breath. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Nice and slow.
Pace ourselves.
Yep. So you guys probably know, because I've been bombarding you guys about the Ben Wassell case. I've been saying Wassell. It's actually Wassell.
Who knew?
You know, I've been bombarding you guys about that. That happened yesterday morning. So I'm going to give you guys just a little update on that. There was some pretty interesting stuff that came out of that. So I was hoping, somebody sent me a video, and I was hoping to play it for you guys of him being interviewed by Channel 10, because he said some awesome things, and Channel 10, of course, didn't air it. Unfortunately, the person took the video with a cell phone and too far away, so the audio wasn't good enough.
We tried to clean it up, but it
just wasn't possible.
You wouldn't understand it.
Yeah, you wouldn't hear it over the air. So what I might try to do is send it to somebody who can put subtitles in, and they'll upload it to YouTube or something, because I think it's important to hear what he had to say about serving his country and then coming back here and now having 3 felonies for owning firearms that he was trained in the military, you know, that he was certified to service. And now he's got 3 felonies. Because
now, mind you, a couple things here. There was no crime committed with these firearms.
None. No.
There was no illegal activity associated with the use or ownership of these firearms. And in point of fact, when Mr. Wassell acquired the firearms in question, they were perfectly legal.
Correct. Yeah.
So what happened was he became a felon by operation of the legislature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he even said, like, I didn't commit an act of violence. I didn't commit a crime here. You know, yeah.
They just own a thing, an inanimate object.
Yeah. So that there is, I'll try to get that cleaned up for you guys, because I think it's really important for people to just, you know, kind of hear his side of the story, especially because it sounds like, no surprise here, that there was a tremendous amount of disinformation spread about the case when it first came out, which I would point to the case in Niagara County that I was very actively involved in. And absolutely, I mean, the media was publishing information that wasn't even verified by the police, you know, just all sorts of stuff, a complete smear campaign. Really took my faith in the justice system. And not that I had a whole lot of faith in media to begin with, but really took those down more than just a notch, like multiple notches down is really, really disheartening to see some of that stuff and see how they were running with it and attacking people, making it so they couldn't have a job before any verdict was even given.
Thank you, progressives, for once again taking the pickaxe and swinging at the foundation stones of our nation and our society.
Yeah. So one of the things I did talk about, though, after the case, we had a kind of like a press conference. We went over to one of the local restaurants. They gave us some space. We had a press conference. WXXI was there. Channel 13, I think, Fox, you know, a couple news outlets were there. And I had a chance to speak. Jim Ostrowski spoke as well, who is Ben's attorney. A couple other guys spoke. Dwayne Whitmer, who's running for Congress. We all spoke, and there's something I want to share with you guys as I've been speaking more and more about this issue, I want to get as many people on board with this as possible. And that's the idea that, actually, you guys don't know this part. So probably one of the scariest, shakiest things that happened in that courtroom was the idea that the representative from the Attorney General's office who was there, I'm not sure how that works, if there's like an assistant AG or if they just have one in each county. I don't think this person probably didn't drive all the way from Albany to be here at this court case.
Oh, I bet he would.
Did.
Oh, I would bet. You're talking about a local district attorney, a prosecutor, or the...
Well, no, this person represented the Attorney General's office.
Oh, that'd be for the state.
So, yeah, so I'm not sure, but I don't think it was the Attorney General who was there. And there's a question in this case about whether or not the Attorney General had any jurisdiction on this case at all to begin with, which I wasn't aware was one of the things in question. And I was very excited and happy to see that the panel of judges seemed to think that to be true. So I don't know if that's how they ruled. They won't even deliver a ruling probably for 2 months.
Yeah.
But they had a serious question of if the state attorney general even had the jurisdiction or the authority to be involved in this case at all. And if they find that to be not true, that they did not have jurisdiction, whole case goes away. Mm-hmm. Sure. And what I told Ben, I said, I hope for you that that's the case. I wish for the rest of us that they'd, strike it down on Second Amendment causes, because otherwise the case gets dropped on technicality. Great for Ben, hope for himself and for his family.
No precedent set, though.
But for everybody else, it's a technicality. It's a mistake that they won't make again. So that is the first thing. But as the Attorney General's representative kind of goes through here, they come to addressing the Second Amendment issue with the SAFE Act. And I think that the majority of us listening here today probably agree that there's a Second Amendment issue with the SAFE Act.
Oh, yeah.
I hope we're on the same page. There may be some people listening who aren't, and that's fine. We'll get you there. But what the state attorney general's representative said was that these are unusual weapons and military in style, and that they are not protected under the Second Amendment.
Right. This is a tack that they always take, especially when it comes to like AR-15s or any weapons that they think they're not weapons. You use a weapon to try to kill somebody. They're firearms. They're trying to classify these firearms as something extraordinary like a grenade launcher. Yeah,
absolutely. And the first point I would take, and this is for all my constitutionalist friends, is that the intent of the Constitution was that the citizenry has the same weapons as the government. So that's one takeaway there. But what he was getting to was just semi-automatic rifles is what he meant, because he didn't even really understand the words he was saying, because you could tell he messed up with a few things as he was talking. And basically is his position, and therefore the position of the Attorney General's office, that semi-automatic rifles are not protected under the Second Amendment.
Well, that's where they're trying to go. We all know that.
Yeah. But I think people need to realize, where this is taking us. I mean, this is not going anywhere good in any amount of time. The fact that they were willing to say that in open court, and nobody blinked. Nobody blinked. I mean, but I tell you what, that courtroom got real noisy when that statement was made.
Really?
And you're not supposed to make noise in the courtroom. And you could hear the murmuring and the like... and all the noise in the courtroom, that I was surprised. Normally the judge or the court staff
gavel for order.
Yeah, and I mean the noise ticked up quite a bit when that statement was made, and the judges kind of just let it simmer down by itself, which I thought was interesting as well. But yeah, so that is just.
So give us a word picture. What was the courtroom like? Yeah, a big turnout, I'm sure, right?
So there was, there was decent turnout. I think probably between 30 to 40 people. Courtroom was fairly packed. There were people there for other cases, but that didn't include the 30 or 40. So there were additional people there for other cases. And there were actually a panel of, I think, 5 judges there, which is interesting. I had never been to that type of court before. Any type of court I've ever been to has always been one judge, and then kind of like prosecution and defense. This was a panel of 5 judges, and it was pretty interesting to watch the interaction between the judges. Their personality certainly shined through the whole situation. So it was actually a pretty interesting experience. I was telling my wife about it. She's like, you could probably write a book about like the court cases as you go through it, just, or turn it into a game. So when we come back from the break, I'm going to share with you guys what I'd like us to do to combat this stuff moving forward. And this isn't just Second Amendment stuff. This can relate to anything. So we'll be back here in a moment on Radio Free New York.
We'll treat you like family at Mark's Pizzeria. We'll treat you like family at Mark's Pizzeria. Great pizza, fresh and good. Simply the best in your neighborhood. Come in, we'll get to know you. Call you by name. We can bring it to you any time of the day. Mark's Pizzeria. We'll treat you like family. Mark's Pizzeria.
This is Dom Genova, owner of Genesee Valley Motors in Avon, your no-nonsense car dealer. Well, we're your no-nonsense truck dealer, too, selling Rams and Fords up to the mightiest that they make. And we have a shop with Master Techs open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. 6 days a week, even Saturday, so you can get your truck serviced when it's not billing hours for you. You may not be used to that. Visit RochesterWorkTrucks.com. That's RochesterWorkTrucks.com.
You're listening to Radio Free New York on the WYSL stations.
All right, guys, we are back on Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. Before we took the break, we were talking about the Ben Wassell case and the SAFE Act piece and how I'd like us to approach these type of issues differently if we want to be successful. Because I would say if you were to look at firearm rights and other rights too, not just firearm rights, but that just happens to be the topic right now, I would say we're largely unsuccessful in protecting them, especially in the last few years. And I think a lot of people in New York definitely feel that way. People in other states maybe a little bit don't feel that way as much yet, but are starting to feel that way. So I want us to just think about how we discuss these issues. And one of the things that I hear constantly that's brought up all the time, every time we talk about firearm rights is what? It's the Bill of Rights, our constitutional rights. Some people say our God-given rights. And I would say that before the break, I talked about what the state attorney general said, which is that these firearms are not protected under the Second Amendment. And I don't believe that for a second, but guess what? There's a lot of people who do. There are a lot of people who believe that, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in right now. Because if a lot of people didn't believe that, these people wouldn't get elected into office. When this type of stuff would come up, they would get pushback. And what we're living in is a situation where the term constitutional right or individual liberty falls on deaf ears. So we need to talk about these issues in a totally different way. I like talking about these issues, and this is any law. This doesn't have to be SAFE Act, but it applies. The idea that if somebody has to question whether the person being prosecuted and going to jail is a good person or not. And that's actually a question I got a lot with this case. Hey, I heard you talking about this Ben Wassell guy on the radio. I want to show up to the court case, but I'm just not really sure. Is he a good guy? And is the situation sounds kind of bad. I saw it was in the media. Is he a bad guy? Because I don't want to back this, or I don't want to do this or that if he's a bad person. And
this does not bear a positive witness to the education of our people who are asking questions like this.
No,
because everybody has constitutional rights, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yep.
And who's a good guy, who's a bad guy is in the eye of the beholder. People believe all kinds of things. They believe that, for example, the Second Amendment, it really was meant to apply to the National Guard, which is a good trick because the National Guard wasn't formed until 1902.
yeah,
So that couldn't possibly be the impetus for one of the rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights. People also think that the First Amendment only applies to individuals and that organizations and corporations and other fictional people, legal people, don't have any First Amendment protections.
Yeah,
they have been indoctrinated into a lot of progressive nonsense.
Yeah. And so I bring this up because I want to talk about the idea of what makes a bad law. And I think it's really easy to discuss, even with a progressive, that a bad law is a law where you have to question if the person being harmed by this law is good or bad, where you don't know the difference, where you can't tell the difference. I'll give you an example. If this case was a murder trial, people wouldn't be asking if this is a good guy or a bad guy. In general, there's certainly some exceptions to that. If this was a bank robbery, if this was an assault or a rape case, where there's actually a party who is injured, damaged, hurt, killed, assaulted, people wouldn't be asking, is that a good guy? They'd be saying, sounds like that person's a criminal. And they should serve whatever time is appropriate for being a criminal, for having aggression towards another person, for taking their property away, for killing them, taking their life. Those laws, those in my opinion, those are valid laws. But when you have a law in place that you actually have to sit there and question, is the person being harmed by this law a good person or a bad person? Did they actually hurt somebody? Did they actually take somebody's private property? At that point, that's where I think people should say, it's a bad law. It should just go away. And that's what we have with the SAFE Act today. We have a law in place that people have to question. Was this guy a good guy? Was this guy a bad guy? And then, government relies on the media to paint the picture as bad and awful as it possible it can be to justify hurting a good person. So in my opinion, and I hope that you guys will share this with me or at least consider it, we should be not talking about the Second Amendment piece of the SAFE Act, because when we talk about that, people aren't hearing it. We should be talking about the idea that a father could be taken away from his children. A mother could be taken away from her children. This has already happened in New York under this law, and they're not criminals. They did no harm to any other person. That's a bad law. Any law like that should just go away, period. And I think that's something that even progressives can hear. The idea that we shouldn't throw a parent in jail, a mother or a father in jail, and take them away from their children on the off chance that maybe, just maybe, sometime in the future, somehow, some way, maybe we catch a bad guy. I just think it's totally wrong. And I think if we talk about it in this sort of way, those people won't be so worried about what type of gun it is. Instead, they'll be worried about, I guess maybe I don't want good people in jail. Maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we should be looking for bad people to put bad people in jail. And
that's careful, though, because that's a slippery slope. I mean, so there are people out there who would see Ben Wassell as a bad guy because he had some kind of a firearm that they thought was threatening or bad for society. And this is the slippery slope we get on. And we have universal rights or we don't. We have rights that devolve from God or we don't. And if you look at this in the right way, and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution were informed by the Judeo-Christian ethic. That's why our money says, "In God we trust." That's why there was the military prayers before major exercises and so forth. And I believe that that's one reason why we've been successful, because God has smiled upon us because our foundation shares foundational stones with his teachings. And when we start, just thinking that we're going to organize society around the whims of man, we're in a really bad place.
Yeah, and I would say those people, they don't hear that, though. The people on the left, the people who are in the state attorney general's office, they hear old document that's out of date.
Right. And enacted by white slaveholders.
Exactly.
Et cetera, which is all, completely out of historical context and irrelevant to today's life anyway. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, and maybe a good guy and a bad guy might not be the best words. Maybe we should say, was somebody harmed? If you have a law in place that is going to take somebody's liberty away from them, throw a man or a woman in a cage, show me somebody actually being physically harmed, losing their property, something like that. Don't throw somebody in jail for plastic on a piece of machinery, like that sort of thing. I think we had to have these conversations because they don't even hear, like what you said, like the Judeo-Christian piece. They're like, no, I'm an atheist, or I'm not that. Maybe I'm something else. Maybe they're Muslim. They don't hear it. And by them not hearing it, their ears shut off and they go, yeah, what you say is invalid to me. And then they vote for some goofball who thinks that, that semi-automatic rifles aren't protected by the Second Amendment. So that's largely what I would like to kind of press to people is we have to start having conversations in a way that more people can hear, because especially in New York, the liberty-minded base of people is shrinking. It is ever shrinking, and people are fleeing this state. And if we can't find a way to adjust our communication so they understand what we're saying in terms that they can hear it, I think that we're New York State. I mean, we're in a downward death spiral. I don't think it's going to get any better.
New York State, the United States of America, any number of states out there have been plagued with the same problem. And I peg the beginning of the decline in the decline of public education, because kids are not being taught about the virtuous, true nature of our republic and what its origins have been, and the obsession with race, for example, the obsession with setting us all against each other in insular little grievance groups. These have all been hallmarks of the progressive left, and this is how a society dies.
Sure. Yeah.
So you need to pay attention to what your kids are being taught in school. Number one. Number two, you need to tell them the truth. Yeah. Now, they will fight you. They'll tend to fight you on this because, you're parents and you're old and you're out of touch and you're not cool. But you still need to live the example that you want them to follow, to be just, to be well-informed, and to tell them the truth. And eventually they'll see it. You may never see it. I mean, it may not happen in your lifetime. But this is the hope that we have for our democratic republic, is that the younger generation is taught the truth about what this country is, what it means, and how we got to where we are today, and not to listen to all the lies about from people who want to divide us.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point about division. I mean, even if you look all the way back to Sun Tzu, and dividing and conquering is a very, very basic technique to win against any adversary. And that's something that I really want to see more people come together, and that's why I think that we have to, as liberty-minded individuals, we have to change our communication, because if we don't, we're going to stay divided. And the other side, I don't know that they're thinking that they should change their communication. Maybe there are some. I don't know. But I'm ready to take that first step forward and help more people take that first step forward to help people see, like, hey, this law you would feel is wrong if it was a car instead, wouldn't you? Or, something else, and kind of replace it with something else. and help them see that, oh yeah, you know what, maybe government shouldn't be legislating my private property, and whatever that private property is, it's important to them. So that's the one thing that I wanted to leave you guys with from that court case, from that event, from that day. We're going to touch on it a little bit more later in the show too, when I'm going to bring up a few other things. But first, I want to welcome some people who are online here. I've got Dan, Kendall, and Danielle, Darren, Frank. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on the show. I'm going to read through, I see a bunch of comments, so I'm going to read through the comments on the break, and then we'll be back here in a moment on Radio Free New York.
You're listening to the voice of liberty. WYSL. AM 1040 Avon, Rochester. FM 92.1 Rochester. FM 95.5 Spencerport. And WYSL1040.com everywhere.
Avon Feed and Supply announces a new taste in local cheese. From dairies in Livingston, Genesee, and Wyoming counties, enjoy Craig's Creamery Cheese from 8 family farms made right here in Livingston County. Craig's Creamery Cheese, simply made with all natural ingredients. Choose your favorite variety exclusively in our area at Avon Feed and Supply. Bottom of the hill, West Main Street in the village of Avon. MasterCard, Visa, and Discover cards always welcome.
I'm Las from Action Towing and Service. What you can expect: latest Action Towing and Service to get your vehicle fixed or checked out or diagnosed is the detailed description on what the vehicle requires. And you can also expect to know exactly what the plan is going forward, whether it's something that you can
it's in there,
or whether it's something that needs to be repaired immediately. We make sure that you know exactly what the vehicle requires. Come down and visit us at 275 Marketplace Drive, right off of Jefferson Road.
You're listening to Radio Free New York on the WYSL stations.
All right, guys, we're back here on Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and I'm reading through some of the comments on the Facebook live stream here. And I'm going to thank Frank for his comment, because this is a beautiful segue into the next thing I want to talk about. So Frank says that the biggest threat we have to the Second Amendment is the apathy of gun owners who believe that confiscation order written into law will never apply to their guns. Between that and the lack of engagement of gun owners, we are going to lose. Well, Frank, I want to thank you so much for bringing that up, because in Brighton, which is a town, I think it's considered a town, right? Town of Brighton?
Yeah, it's Brighton.
Yeah, town.
I'm sorry, it's a town, a suburban town, southeastern side of Rochester.
Yep. So here in Monroe County, they just passed, and Bob, I don't know if you saw this or not.
I did.
They just passed a safe firearm storage law. And before I get into the meat and potatoes of this, because I know I'm going to make some people angry, I already have on social media. So who knows? Maybe somebody gets angry enough to call into the show. We'll see. But I want to ask people to think about it as we have this conversation. Are you okay with First Amendment zones? Are you okay with the idea that government has now over the years said you can have your freedom of speech in a public place, but only the public places we deem you are allowed to have it. And it's going to be over here, and you're going to be fenced in, and you can have your First Amendment rights, but over there. So kind of think about that, because I'm personally not okay with that. But if you are, then maybe we're just going to disagree on the issue, which is fine. Disagreeing is fine. So this next law, I kind of see very similar to the First Amendment laws, because you can have your firearm, but it must be locked and stored safely when and where we as government say. And there's going to be some safety concerns. There's going to be some firearm owners who's like, wait, but we have safety concerns. I promise to address those as well. But first, I want to share with you guys what was said by the Brighton Town Supervisor about this. It says that this law amends the Brighton Town Code by requiring firearms not in a person's possession or immediate control, which is going to leave questions, for people. What is possession and what is
another sign of a bad law, by the way.
Yep.
If they're vague and indeterminate, so they have to be litigated.
Correct.
In order for you to receive the protection under those laws, it's a bad law.
Yeah. So let me find this again here. Not in a person's possession or immediate control, to be either safely stored in a locked storage container or locked using a firearm locking device. Then later he goes on to say, we hope that we'll get a C word. I don't like this word. Compliance, partly because it does become part of the conversation. People understand it's important.
What conversation? Who's having conversations about some private gun owner having a gun in his house? Yeah. Who's talking about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. So
there's thousands of people in the town of Brighton who have legal firearms right now. Are they shooting people?
Not that I've seen in the news.
Any accidental discharges going on? Somebody blows his toes off? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I actually satirized this on the morning news a couple mornings ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
okay.
I was like, honey, do you know the combination of the gun safe? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have this deranged guy just broke in here. He's stealing our stuff and may want to kill us. I gotta shoot him. Can you hang out for just a minute, sir? Yeah, I'll be right with you as soon as I get the combination of the gun safe. I gotta get my gun.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you're going to lock the gun away where it's not
no longer
readily accessible to you.
Yeah.
What's the point of having it?
Yeah. And these are the laws that we got to be really concerned about. They are. It's totally reactionary legislation.
It's stupid. It's not needed. It doesn't address any real need.
Yeah. It also opens the door for government to tell you what you can do with your private property in your private home behind closed doors. The government's now trying to tell you what you can and cannot do. Now, here's maybe my biggest pet peeve with this, and this is where I'm going to make people upset. Literally, every time we talk about gun control, I could be in a room of 100 conservatives, 100 gun owners, or 1,000 even. It doesn't matter. And I can say, how are they going to pass gun control? How are they going to restrict your lights? And everybody will stand up, shout, wave their hands and say, calling it safety, saying it's for the children, all that. And we're like, yeah, we all know that. But then when this type of law comes out, what do gun owners do? They say, well, if you're a responsible gun owner, that's just fine. And they start defending the law in the name of safety and children.
I don't think so. I don't think most gun owners will react that way.
No, this morning I got hammered on social media by gun owners about it.
First of all, half the people on social media, I think, are... I don't know. I don't. This is why I don't do social media.
Yeah. But the thing is, those people are out there. That's how they feel. And there were plenty of other people on the other side too. But the fact
minority,
is,
I think.
They're both gun owners, and I would say for those people, and this is the part that's going to make them angry, but it doesn't bother me a bit. And I hope it makes you angry because hopefully you see it. If you're taking that stance that this is okay for gun safety, that this is okay to protect the children, I just want you to realize that the people that you make fun of that want Fight for 15, you're doing the same thing they were. Where they're sitting there, they're the people working at McDonald's, they're the people working at Taco Bell or some fast food joint. They're fighting for 15, and they're literally fighting for the thing that's going to replace them and take their job away. They're fighting for something that's going to harm them. If you're a firearm owner and you're fighting for safe storage, you're doing the same thing they are, because you're the one that's going to get hurt by it.
I would hope no Second Amendment proponents are out there fighting for safe storage, because once again, think of the slippery slope argument here. The old when your camel gets his nose in the tent, pretty soon you're going to have a camel in the tent. So you're okay with safe storage? All right. Did you notice that Mr. Maley had a word in that law, the C word of compliance? Mm-hmm. So that law contemplates compliance.
Yes.
How do we enforce compliance? Mm-hmm. What's going to happen is you're going to have warrantless searches of your premises to make sure that you're in compliance. You're going to get a knock on the door. What, you think this is far-fetched? It's not. No. It's not. And somebody's going to come and say, we want to check your firearm. We see that you're a licensed gun owner. That's great. Let's see where it's locked up. And guess what? If it's not locked up or it doesn't somehow satisfy them, then you're going to lose your guns.
Yeah. And here's the thing. A lot of people would hear this, especially people who are not gun owners, who hear this and go, yeah, that seems reasonable. This seems, this seems this and that.
No.
But you know what? How do I know where this stuff leads? Red flag laws, we have them now. SAFE Act, we have it now. Any type of thing that firearm owners look at and say, yeah, I'll give a little more. That's what this sort of stuff turns into.
Yeah. Who do you? I don't use bump stocks anyway.
Exactly. Bump stocks are another great example where somebody goes, well, who really needs one? Or this is my favorite one that I hear from firearm owners, especially rifle shooters, in regards to bump stock bans. And it just irks me so much because it's like you've totally missed the point. They go, well, you can't really be that accurate with the bump stock anyways. It's like, no, you've just made an excuse to allow for gun control, to allow further gun registration, confiscation, whatever it is. You're basically making up excuses to allow a further infringement on your right.
It's incremental. This is why they call these people progressives. They're like cockroaches. Cockroaches have nothing to do all day but invade your kitchen or your house in some way. They work on this singular purpose all the time. Progressives do the same thing. It's like little eroding drops of water. We wear away a few of those rights just, with this continual stream of, well, there's this is common sense control. Well, no reasonable person is going to object to this suggestion. But you add it all up, and someday you wake up and the practicality of your owning firearms and using firearms has diminished to the point where it no longer makes sense for you to have them.
Yeah.
At which point you sell them or turn them over to the government, which is what they want.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. Let's say for a moment that this actually would increase safety. Let's play devil's advocate. Let's say that it would. Well, we've got a pretty serious issue then because we don't have safe storage for vehicles. And we know that DUI, DWI, and car accidents account for way more deaths and accidental deaths than firearms. We also don't have safe storage for Big Macs, milkshakes, and diabetes is one of the top deaths in our country, or top causes for death, and also congestive heart failure. We've got irresponsible car owners, we've got irresponsible eaters. Us being responsible, we're going to need safe storage for everything. So vehicles, you can't own a vehicle anymore if it's not locked away in your garage with an alarm system. This is the idea. This is what this sounds like to me when I hear this sort of thing. So it's just, to me, it's crazy. And then I get that the people in Brighton probably didn't grow up in the 19th Ward like I did. So I get that, maybe they didn't grow up having people actually try to break into their homes in broad daylight sometimes. So maybe they don't understand the adrenaline rush you get and how when seconds count, they really count. When the police are far away, they're actually 15, 20, 30 minutes out. That's a big deal.
It's like the old joke, when the seconds count, the police are just minutes away.
Exactly.
And the other thing about this, too, and this is true of most gun legislation, it has no effect on crime. Has zero effect on crime. Actually, what it does is it creates crime. It creates it's kind of like the process crimes where you have a special prosecutor who's looking into Russian collusion, and so they haul these witnesses in. There's no crime that's been committed, but they catch somebody not remembering some fact correctly, and then they charge them with perjury. So it's the same thing. These gun control laws do not affect crime because criminals, by definition, don't follow the law. So what you're doing is coming up with one more law that criminals are going to ignore in the commission of, stealing and killing and maiming.
Yeah. Now, there is one thing that I do want to address before we take a break, because I know that this is resting heavy on a lot of firearm owners' minds, and that is the idea of what if there's children in the home? And I get that, especially because I have friends with kids who come over to my house. And I'm very cognizant of that. And I own firearms. And I'm also very I grew up with firearms in the house. I totally 100% agree with, as a firearm owner, you should be responsible. Now, I don't agree that the government should force responsibility and define what responsibility it is. But I will also say, and if you guys go back and check our last show that we had with Dave from Rochester Personal Defense, we spent a whole segment talking about how safe firearms can be in the home, how educating children at a young age will prevent accidents, and experiences I've had with friends who literally their children did go over to somebody's home who was an irresponsible gun owner, who left a firearm in the open where children could find it. And those kids, having that education from a young age, immediately said, we can't touch this. We know, we were educated. We're not supposed to do this. We need to go find an adult. And nothing bad happened. It's also terrible that they were even put in that situation. But by educating kids, it shouldn't matter. And that's really what it comes down to. Is
it's not rocket science. You just teach the kids that this is you sit down, you have a little session with them, kind of like the scene in Witness with Harrison Ford and little Amish boy, Lucas Haas, where you teach him and her about the firearm and why it's dangerous and why you must never touch it. Do we leave our car keys out for the kids to go on joyrides? I mean, the car is a dangerous instrumentality, as you have already observed.
Oh,
I mean, have we had problems with kids taking the car keys and going on joyrides?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Car keys are readily accessible, and kids know not to drive them. Does it happen sometimes? Yes, but it's not such a big problem that we're legislating car alarm systems and cars being locked in garages and all of this other stuff.
Outlawing cars.
Yeah. So, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. We will be back in a moment on Radio Free New York.
Whether your new address is down the street or across the country, moving can be complicated. Make things simple with Clark Moving and Storage. Based in Rochester, New York, you can trust our expert team of professionals to pack, ship, or store your belongings safely and affordably. As a proud member of the Better Business Bureau, Clark Moving and Storage has helped thousands of customers make a seamless transition to their new home or business. Here, we believe no one customer is the same. That's why it's important to us to customize our relocation packages to meet your specific needs. Are you looking for more than a household mover? We also specialize in office relocation, transportation of high-value equipment, and logistics management. And take advantage of our Go Minis, portable storage containers. They're convenient and secure.
Locally owned and operated, we've served Western New York since 1985. For all life's big moves, choose Clark Moving and Storage.
Call 585-594-5000. Visit clarkmoving.com.
Coming back, listening to Radio Free New York on the WYSL stations.
All right, guys, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and this whole show has been Second Amendment stuff, which is fine. I'm gonna do one more little bit on Second Amendment, and then we're gonna beat up Cuomo and Amazon.
Yay, he's in town. Why not?
Oh yeah, why not, right? One of the things that we talked about is when seconds matter, the police are minutes away. And I actually have some crime stats that I want to share with you guys, just so that people understand how severe it really could be, and that one time you need it, if it's not there, you've got an issue. So New York City this year, their murder rate is already up by 55%.
Wow,
by
55%.
55%. And take into consideration, just about everything's banned in New York City already. I mean, you can't own basically anything. I think you can own a shotgun in New York City if you pass a extremely rigorous background check and get a special permit for it. Outside of that, most firearms you can't have in New York City. You'll just go to jail.
Don't you need to keep it at a gun club too? Or something?
That might be being proposed. I'm not as familiar with that.
Maybe that's handguns.
Could be, yeah.
I know there's 6 shooting ranges in New York City, and they're underground. And there's really, it's really...
and I think it's really hard to get into one.
Yeah.
And home invasions aren't uncommon, especially in Monroe County. I mean, if you just Google home invasion Monroe County, home invasion Rochester, New York, you will see a myriad of articles, even in the last 6 months, of things. And don't forget, it wasn't so long ago that there was a family tied up in their home and their house was burnt down with them in it. There were, I think, U of R students kidnapped and bodies dumped in, I think it was the Genesee River, if I recall. So, like, I know sometimes it's easy to walk around and think crime doesn't happen, but these happen. So I've got some FBI statistics here for you. There's a break-in every 13 seconds. Every 13 seconds, there's a break-in. About 1.65 million break-ins every year. About 28% of the time, somebody is home during those break-ins. Now, you guys might wonder why some of these numbers don't fully line up. I took out the numbers that were for businesses. I only did homes, but these numbers could be significantly higher if we did businesses as well. And, that's a good question. Do these laws apply to businesses? I'm not sure if it's just your home or if it's your business that this law applies to. 26% of the people whose home was broken into, that they were harmed or worse. Just 19 million people had somebody break into their home and either assault them, rape them, or kill them. 19 million. So if you are willing to gamble with those statistics, that's up to you. I'm personally not willing to gamble with those statistics. And that can be a personal choice, though. Don't push on everybody else. Don't legislate how you have your property in your home. I just think it's totally wrong. So now we're going to switch. We're going to switch over to good old Cuomo here and his issues with Amazon. His new name is Andrew Amazon Cuomo, as I'm seeing is being floated around in the media. And sounds like he's tried to meet with Bezos himself to get Amazon back. Now he is calling Amazon execs apparently multiple times over the last few weeks. He put up a public letter of support with 70 plus unions and local businesses and community leaders. And I want to read to you guys the quote from Amazon, because I think this is very telling of what's going on, behind the facade. And it says, "We think we could have gotten New York done, but you have to say, at what cost?" This is from Holly Sullivan, Amazon's Director of Global Economic Development. He said this in Virginia. He said this on Thursday, so this was yesterday. He said, "We made a prudent decision that gives us the opportunity to hyper-focus on DC." So I know I've told you guys before that I think that cost was a significantly bigger factor here than AOC. I still feel that way. I still think that Amazon pulled out, and that AOC was a great scapegoat for this. And I've actually seen a lot of people posting online and stuff saying that Amazon was going to bring in $27 billion in taxes over the next 10 years. I don't buy it. And I could be totally wrong here. I didn't dig into all the numbers, but I'll tell you why I don't buy it. I don't buy it because Amazon reported a profit of $10 billion this year and last year. So 2 years in a row, about $10 billion. They haven't paid a dime in federal taxes. Not a dime, because they've been able to leverage various tax credits, various research programs, all this other stuff, profit $10 billion and not pay any of those federal taxes. Now, here's the thing. They did $800 billion in business about. You only pay taxes on your profit, which is why I'm talking about profit. And for those who might say, what's profit? Profit is the money you have left after you've paid for all of your expenses. So Amazon made, we'll call it $800 billion. They spent $790 billion of it on things like salaries, infrastructure, cost of business, travel, whatever that may be. At the end, they've got $10 billion left. That's what you're supposed to be taxed on. So they figured out how to maneuver past that. In general, and I'll explain why in a minute, in general, that's the same number that you pay your state taxes on as well. Now, I say in general because there are things like payroll tax, which you pay throughout the year. There's things like property tax. So I did just a really, really rough calculation here. They said that it was going to be 25,000 jobs at $150,000 per year. I've seen some other weird numbers that now it was going to be 40,000 jobs, and I don't know if that was ever committed or if that's just the news fluffing stuff up. I'm not really sure.
Seems to be SOP for these Amazon projects. I think they do an elastic kind of estimate of 25 to 40,000 jobs. Yeah. It's the same number that we saw in Virginia.
Yeah. So I just took, and I'm not sure what the payroll tax is right now, but I'm going to call it 6%. I think 6% is actually kind of high.
Federal is 7.65.
Payroll tax? Or?
Well, that's the employer contribution.
Okay. All right. So I did 6%, assuming that that's the state payroll tax. I think it might be a little lower than that.
I think it's a little higher, actually. I think it's like 8. The combination of the two is like 15.
15. Okay. So I did state. I did it at 6%, but I'll just redo it here while we're here. So 25,000 jobs times $150,000 a year gives us a nice big number there. And then we multiply that by 0.08 to see what 8% of that would be. That's 300 million. So then we'll give it, 300 million over 10 years. Oh, that's $3 billion. So I say that to say there's $3 billion there. We're already giving them $3 billion. I don't know that they're going to make up the rest of the taxes or this $27 billion that people are talking about in property tax. And if they did, that's going to New York City. It's not going to New York State. Now, there's other things to consider as well. There totally are, and I'm not going to have enough time to go through all of it. So we're going to have to continue this discussion into Monday.
Presumably, the 25,000 to 40,000 people are going to buy things. There's going to be a lot of sales tax.
So there's going to be some sales tax there, for example. There's going to be some other fees and regulatory things, I'm sure. But what I'm getting at is Amazon's really good at not paying taxes already. And I'm sure that they're going to leverage a lot of state credits, a whole bunch of things. So I think that 28 to 27 billion that people are throwing around over 10 years is unrealistic, overprojected, like most government things are. Government always overpromises and way underdelivers. And that's also assuming they even stick around in New York State for 10 years. So there's a whole bunch more that I wanted to go through, but there is just not going to be enough time to kind of go through this. So I guess what I'm saying here is Amazon's not coming to New York. I don't think they are. And I think that it has a lot more to do with how expensive New York is versus AOC and all those other people. And some people have actually said, oh, you must be friends with AOC. You're defending her. No, not at all. I still think it's a bad deal. Never met her before. Disagree with her on a ton of things. And I bet if her and I were in the same room and we talked about why we thought the Amazon deal was bad for New York, we probably wouldn't even agree on that. She'd have her own reasons. I'd have my own reasons. But I don't think that the projected numbers would have been anywhere near what they're saying. I don't think New York would have actually benefited. I don't. And I think that once Amazon realized that they weren't going to benefit to the level they wanted to, I think that's the real reason that they backed out. And, I'm happy to have people comment or call or email me and tell me why I'm wrong. I'm okay with that, too, because I certainly haven't ran all the numbers, but this is just kind of some preliminary stuff that I think is worth discussing.
Well, all right. Maybe Andy's in town today. Maybe he heard your comment.
Oh yeah.
Maybe he'll take it under take it under advisement.
I'm sure he's an avid listener of the show. I'm sure he likes being beat up all the time. And actually on Monday, so I'll give you guys a real sneak peek on Monday. Monday, I'm going to talk about a poll I put out about Amazon and what New York State should have done with $3 billion in tax breaks, and what the results are, because the results will be in by then, and also why everybody was so upset with that poll. It's actually very entertaining. So I'll see you guys Monday, 1 p.m. on Radio Free New York.
Patrick presents up to $10,000 off a new 18 Buick Tourex